Hello, welcome to a solo episode. I've been taking a little bit of a break just with Labor Day and some personal things happening. Appreciate anybody that's sticking with me for sticking with me. Going solo today, and I wanted to kind of talk about some things that had happened over the week, some things that I personally have been dealing with on a personal level, and kind of my continuous growth. Well, first of all, I want to start off today by just expressing my gratitude to everybody that follows and listens to this channel. It really means a lot to me that when I hear people say that some episodes help them, or if somebody continues to encourage me to do it because it's helping them in some way, that really means a lot to me. And any way I can continue to spread the word of positivity across this world, it's another win. That's what this is all about. It's all about love. It's kind of funny. So I was watching the Chinese military parade yesterday. By the way, why don't we have a parade for our military? Some sort of where we're showing off our newest tanks and our newest jets. And I just think that's so interesting. And by the way, why would you want to showcase to the world what your weapons are? I think part of the idea of war is to surprise your enemy instead of show them what's coming at you. And obviously they probably aren't showing the top secret stuff. And I guess in a way it's kind of like who can swing their dick harder. And China really swung their dick yesterday. Putin showed up, Kim Jong-un showed up. So it was a big event. And then Trump was a little bit butthurt about it. I could tell by the tweet that he had sent out there. It ended with something like warm regards to Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un. Good luck conspiring against America. But and that was just one line of a paragraph long tweet, half of it on all caps like usual. And the tone had shifted like 3 or 4 times. Kind of feel like he's really flying off his rocker lately. There's been a lot of concerning things. But one of the points I wanted to touch on and why I brought this up is I look at all this equipment, these nuclear warheads, these jets, these weapons to kill other people. And we're looking at trillions and trillions of dollars going along this road in this other country. And we look at our own military and all the money it's invested in it. And we say it's for protection, it's for defense. It just can't. Can we envision a world where war doesn't exist and all that money just goes towards humanity? Now I realize that isn't entirely possible for a few different reasons. One is that would then require everybody to be selfless, which will never happen. There's always going to be selfishness. And even if it's, something as simple as a pizza at a party, there's 8 pieces, there's 7 people. There's going to be one that's going to be tempted to take 2 before anybody has the last piece as an option, if somebody plans that out in their head in advance. I guess what the point I'm making is, first of all, I don't agree with the idea of war whatsoever, because there's so many innocent civilians and citizens that die from this, and it's not the people that are actually arguing about the bullshit. I can almost guarantee you, if I were to meet somebody from, let's see, let's say the US is at war with Iraq, and we have this rivalry with each other, and I end up meeting somebody, at let's say a Walmart or something, and we both look at each other in the aisle and we're both going to grab the same thing. And I look over at this person, I say, "Oh, my bad, you go ahead." And this person goes, "No, you go ahead." And it turns out that this person is Iraqi. Now, if we were on a battlefield and we saw each other, we would shoot each other and try to kill each other. But for what? For what reason? Because we're defending our country, which, by the way, I support our troops. I'm not against our troops. But the idea of war is so confusing to me, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot, is why? Why do us citizens continue to fight other countries' citizens and kill them for our own safety. But if there weren't these old guys in charge that told us that we hated each other, I don't think that we would be trying to kill each other. Instead, I think we would be very welcoming of each other and very cordial when we see each other in public. There's a lot of facets to war. There's the money, there's the weapons contract companies that are hand selected by the government, and usually the CEOs of those companies have their hands in the cookie jar of these politicians that make the decision of who gets the funding and all this other bullshit. There's also the factor to war that doesn't get talked about a lot, and it's the constant murders and rape that take place in war zones because law is no longer enforced, and these war zones are such dangerous places, more than it just being at the risk of another country bombing you. Sometimes it's the military that's of the homeland that is carrying out these heinous acts on their own people. So that's another facet to war that is just so, I guess, compelling, but it's just such an unnecessary evil in our world. I honestly believe that if, let's say, we didn't have any war, would corrupt and powerful politicians still exist? It's a good question, and I don't know the answer to it, but it's circling in my mind, and maybe I might have an answer later. I'm going to kind of change gears now, like completely, and kind of talk about what I've been dealing with lately mentally. As I continue to integrate back from Costa Rica, now 6 months sober of hard drugs, which is really cool. I've maybe had, I don't know, 5 beers since I've been back, 5 or 6 beers, just for enjoyment, socialization. I've had some weed as well, but hard drugs is completely out of my life now. And I'm finding myself reflecting a lot on my life and why I became a hard drug addict. And I've begun writing kind of like a journal of details, all the way from interactions on the school bus on the way to school to maybe standing in a social circle with people that I didn't know very well, or that I oftentimes just felt like an outsider. When I was in 6th and 7th grade, I would lie to a lot of my friends at school about doing drugs because I thought it was cool, and I thought they would look at me in a way that I felt was like looking up to me, like, oh, he's dabbling in that stuff, like, oh, that's so cool, it's so cool. And I would talk about it like it was this flex. Well, here we are, we're speaking things into existence. I flexed about it like this is something to be proud of, and then it ends up happening, it ends up destroying my life. So that's one thing I think about, and I'm trying to figure out why I always wanted other people to think that I'm cool, and other people to accept me into their groups, because each one of us are individual people. We each have our own flair, spice. Sometimes those personality traits and those characteristics may not fit into the puzzle that is society. Instead, you have a jigsaw piece when you're just trying to fit 4 corners. And I'm now realizing that is, in a way, what my personality is I'm kind of a jigsaw piece, or I am a jigsaw piece, because I don't fit in with society. I don't like Marvel movies. I'm drifting away from sports. I don't believe in Western medicine. I'm very traditional in that way, and this world has become so welcoming of so many different types of people, but I really feel like white males have been left behind. And the argument to that is that white males excluded other people before then, so this is This is payback. And maybe this is, you know, my generation's way of understanding how others feel. And that gives me maybe a different perspective on things, not being the premier class of races, which, by the way, I think is complete bullshit. I've never seen skin color. I've never judged on skin color. Now, if I do happen to, so I will admit, if I see somebody in traffic and I see a certain race driving a minivan, I say typical. It's not racist. That's just, it's fucking pattern recognition. So going back to my point of always wanting to fit in, I don't know yet why it was so important to me to fit in and why it was so important to me to be cool and to be popular. What was that about? Did that, and by the way, I never did fit in. I had a situation where I was in a private school, Catholic school, up until 8th grade. There's 50 people total in each grade, 25 per class. We knew each other from 1st grade through 8th. And it was such a cool experience, by the way. It was a really good school, really good upbringing. And I was used to it. I was comfortable with it. Catholic school, we go to church every Wednesday. We still had recess every day in 8th grade. I move on to high school. New school, I maybe know my neighbor. I was going to play football. I didn't know anybody when I started the weight training process in the summer. I didn't know how to put football pads on. I had never played football in an organized fashion. And I was always scared to ask anybody. I was always a very quiet person. I still am to this day when it comes to public settings. I'm trying to open up that, maybe they call it the throat chakra, being able to, project, right? And project in public. Just actually sign up for some public speaking classes. Going to look at debate classes. It's a weapon. Our words are a weapon because we let words be weapons. Anyway, putting on my equipment for football, and I didn't know about hip pads or how they're supposed to fit, right? And this is before the school year had started. This is at 2-a-days. And we were doing this tackling drill one day. And I still remember the helmet going right into my hip. I had a bruise from my belly button over to the side of my hip. It was fucking bad. It hurt. I still continued to play for the rest of the week. I think it was like 3 or 4 days later, actually, I had become fatally ill, sicker than shit, throwing up like crazy. And it turns out that I had an appendectomy. Now, we didn't link the appendectomy to the hit, but I mean, it's not a coincidence that I had the big bruise there and then my appendix burst after. So that was a process, because initially you'd go to urgent care and then you go to the hospital. I know when I got to the hospital that they couldn't give me anything to drink because I had to do some different CT scans and I had to drink something that would make my insides glow, no water. So I'm in the emergency room for over 15 hours. I'm not allowed to drink any water. I'm in pain. And finally I get operated on at 2 a.m. And this had all begun at 11 the previous day, 11 a.m. So it was a fairly traumatic experience. And I stayed in the hospital for 5 days after because they wanted to monitor me and check back in on me, because it was a pretty aggressive appendectomy. It wasn't pleasant whatsoever. It was painful. So we're still about 2 or 3 weeks out from school at this point. I still don't really know anybody, because even when I did football for like the 7 practices I showed up for, I'd never had fit in with anybody. I didn't really talk to anybody. I was a quiet guy. I didn't know anyone. Again, 1st through 8th grade, completely different people, completely different school, different area altogether, right? So let's fast forward roughly about a week. I'm out of the hospital finally, and I'm still sicker and shit. So sick. Turns out that the surgeon who had performed the appendectomy surgery had left gangrene in my gut. And the gangrene was, from what I remember, this was, 16, 17 years ago now. The gangrene was what, roughly centimeters to inches away from my lung. So it could have ended up being a very fatal situation. So you had to go back to the hospital, get the gangrene sucked out. And then they hooked me up to a colostomy bag for 2 weeks after that to continue draining the gangrene. Was a new kid in a high school that was already having these social anxiety issues. I'm like, fuck, I can't go to school with a bag. How embarrassing. So my first 2 weeks of high school, brand new to the school, I knew one person who was my neighbor. I was shy, and I was nervous because I was keeping this bag in my sweatshirt pocket so none of the kids would see it. I mean, how fucking embarrassing is that? For the rest of high school, you'd be known as the kid that had the shit bag attached to him. And looking back at it, it's kind of funny in some ways. But you have to laugh at it, right? And again, like at lunchtime, sit by myself, which is fine. It's cool. I don't hold any resentment against anybody in high school because I think we're all different people from high school. So that's not what I'm getting at right now. But what I'm getting at is it goes back to the whole dependency on hard drugs wanting to be cool. So I would say, let's see here. I think it was like my second or third day in high school. And I'm sitting in the back of the classroom and math class. And I look over to my left and there's this kid who's like sleeping on his desk. And I thought that was so funny because Catholic school, there's no heads on desks. Like it's going to get called out. You're not going to get hit by a ruler anymore, but it's going to get called out. So anyways, he kind of lifts his head and he looks over at me, and keep in mind, I'm 14 at the time, coming from a Catholic school. Like I hadn't even started jerking off yet. I was very, very fresh. That's the best way to put it. And he signals this at me. Like, do you smoke? And I said, no. And I'm fucking glad that I did, by the way, because had I started at 14, holy shit, man. What a different projection that is. Anyway, so that was my first run-in with drugs. And what's so funny is I would talk about doing them like I'm cool, and then I get offered them and I turn them down like a fucking pussy, right? So let's carry on throughout my freshman year. Again, not a lot of friends. I end up making maybe one or two friends throughout the year. And it wasn't friendships for the purpose of, let me readjust this quick. I did not make friendships for the purpose of people I liked. I made friends with certain people that I thought would get me into a more popular, cooler group of people. That's just fucking shitty. And by the way, when your intentions, let's go back to intentions for a second. When we've talked about intentions on this channel, when your intentions aren't pure, you're not going to get the results you want. For example, let's say I go to the grocery store with no intention. I end up with a bunch of random shit in my cart. This is a very simple example. But let's say I go to Walmart for milk and eggs. Well, most of the time, 90% of the time, milk and eggs end up in my cart. The other 10% of the time, I end up grabbing a whole bunch of random shit. And then I get home like, fuck, I forgot the eggs. But besides the point, it's a very, very simple example. It's a lot more complicated than that. My friendships with intent were not present when I was young. And how could they be? How could we be so self-aware to understand what the purpose of our intentions were? We can't. It's not likely. So to this point, no girlfriend, outcast. I was using these friends to get to other friend groups. And I think honestly that those guys didn't even like me anyways. It ended up ending bad because one life lesson I had learned in my freshman year that I think is very valid is don't talk about other people's business to other people. In high school, it's so common to talk shit behind somebody's back. And by the way, that's like, if you want to destroy some friendships in high school, talk shit behind people's backs, because that shit will get out every time. Now, who am I talking to? Nobody that goes to high school anymore. Just a little life lesson, I guess. Maybe I'll show my kids before they go. Important lesson. So going back to the whole high school journey, The following year, I'm like, okay, this is sophomore year. The following year, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do football again. I'm gonna start lifting. I need to catch up. I want to be cool. It's what matters. And I start lifting too heavy and I end up getting this hernia. And again, if you want your business to be public, just tell one person, because then word spreads. So when I got the hernia, I ended up getting the wall that breaks down in your stomach lining. Anyways, the wall that of course had broken down was the wall that was right above my nutsack. So I had 3 testicles essentially. That's what it felt like for months. And I didn't realize it was a hernia at the time. And of course you tell one person and then the whole fucking school knows. And for somebody that was so self-conscious about who they are, I can't even explain to you how I felt, how that made me feel. It made me feel embarrassed. And I was thinking, man, what a setback for me. What a fucking setback, right? I ended up getting the surgery. I missed the football season. And I'm back to square one again, where I'm just trying to rehab and figure out a new plan. So something I had started in 8th grade that had gone through sophomore year is I had joined this band. And I had started playing guitar when I was 13 years old. American Idiot, Green Day, was like the first musical band that I was like, oh shit, I want to play their stuff. I want to learn how to play their music. I love it. The whole CD was so cool. As a 12-year-old kid, loved it. I wanted to put like eyeliner on my eyes like Billy Joe Armstrong, for God's sakes. I was just idolizing that shit, eating it up. And then eventually got to maybe more advanced music, Guns N' Roses, Led Zeppelin, Ozzy Osbourne, so a lot more music that was more technical. When I joined this band, I met one of the band members the first day that we had this jam session, and I had realized how different styles play music. And something that is beneficial for thrash metal or heavy metal, which this band ended up being, is it was a lot more about rhythm, the rhythm of the right hand rather than the left hand. As far as like shredding, you had your thirds and your fourths to a beat. It's stuff that I never really put a whole lot of focus on. And I was always fucking lousy dancer. People would make fun of me all the time for dancing. So I just never had rhythm. Just never did. But anyways, we ended up proceeding forward with the band, and we played some different shows. And this was, I want to say it was throughout the sophomore year. A lot of it was, and we had begun getting better and better. I myself was never great at rhythm, but I could shred. And that paid to be valuable. So we ended up doing a battle of the bands in high school. And let me backtrack a little bit. So the band had originally started with 4 of us, 2 guitar players, a bass player, and a drum player. And the bass player was the singer, but I had a friend from middle school that could sing pretty friggin' well, and we welcomed him into the band. And we did a battle of the bands, we did some shows, we ended up winning battle of the bands, we ended up earning some studio time. We had an opportunity to open for the band Trivium in Wisconsin, but I never liked heavy metal. And again, here comes the ego, right? And maybe this, as I'm talking through this, maybe I'm answering some of my own questions. It was the ego of like, well, metal doesn't have any good looking girls in the front row. All I have is a bunch of fat, sweaty dudes moshing with each other in a pit. Why the fuck would I want that? And everyone's fucking fingernails are black. I was so judgmental. Black shirts, everything's black, and heavy metal's not my scene. It's not my thing. Again, here I am, a jigsaw piece, right? I'm not this cookie cutter personality. So I was looking at other bands, and I also was struggling with rhythm. I couldn't figure out the thirds. It was something I wasn't good at, no matter how much I practiced. So I ended up joining some other bands, but I still stayed loyal to the band that I had begun with, because first of all, we were the furthest along. And second of all, this was like my friend group. This was the guys that I had spent like the last year with. This was the first friend group I had in high school. This was the first group of guys where like we actually did like a Christmas party together, and we would, every Saturday we're in the garage playing music, garage band, right? And we had some really fun times, to be honest, but it just wasn't my style of music. And my idea was, let's go a little bit more towards Nickelback and further away from Lamb of God. So after Battle of the Bands, and I think it was one other show that we did, I ended up getting kicked out of the band. I find out later that the person that was instrumental in that decision was my friend that I had brought into the band. So if you want to talk about a mind fuck, there it is. And I should have known better because that friend had stolen from me in middle school as well. And I still had stayed friends with them. Why? Doesn't make sense. I guess I had believed in second chances. And again, it goes back to the whole like fitting in thing, right? It just never did. And I always wanted to. So I shoehorned people into my life who consistently would fuck me over. So that's just a little snippet. I can continue this story someday if anybody wants to hear it. Maybe I'll make a part 2 to it. I've been journaling all these details. I'm thinking about releasing, I don't know, some 50-page memoir of my journey from 6th, 8th grade, from where I believe I had made that split that we talk about in Costa Rica to today. I definitely want to dive heavy into the, I would say, the space. I guess that's the best way to put it. I really do want to dive into the throes of drug addiction and what it did to my life, what it did to my family, because I think it's really important. And I'm part of a few different sober groups trying to, make the world a better place. And I really think some sort of well thought out written story would be beneficial to somebody. I mean, again, if it's only to one person, that's great. So that's something I've been working on. And as I've been journaling it, I've been finding myself extremely emotional about it. You have to remember, when you're on drugs, and we're going to get to this about a different topic shortly, but when you're on drugs, when you're doing hard drugs, you're numbing the pain. And I have a lot of shit to untangle that I never actually faced. We can get into the topic of me, knocking up a girl in high school and running away from it. And by the way, some of the actions were justified, and there's no justification of abandoning somebody, but the story is a lot more complicated than a lot of people think. That's for sure. So, there's another thing to numb. And then I end up getting together with another girl, breaking up with her, going to see her in another state, knocking her up. And then I'm thrusted into this marriage because now I feel guilty from the previous pregnancy. Why? Because I'm wanting to look like a good person to people, because my ego is telling me that I want to be looked at in a certain kind of light. I want to be looked at in a positive way. Don't listen to your fucking ego. Tell that shit to go to bed. You sit down with your ego at the table and you look across at it and you say, you're not in charge. I am. So listening again, and it's a complicated process. It's not like everybody understands what their ego is or who their ego is. But once you enter that realm of spirituality, you're able to establish what the ego is and what God is and what the right decision is. And that's what I'm following to this point. I'm listening to God, and I'm following that path. Okay. I'm going to move on to one last topic. I've talked about the shooting here in Minneapolis, the kids in the church. Talked about it a lot. I've not taken any political side, just so everybody knows, because it's not a political issue. There's nothing political about what happened last week. in Minnesota. What we saw, there's actually a couple of different theories, but what we saw on the news was good versus evil, and we saw evil win. This isn't a gun debate. This isn't a trans debate, although there are a lot of violent criminals that are trans. But I think we may have a better answer to that than, again, what's on the surface. You need to dig deep. So this isn't a gun debate. This isn't a trans debate. This is a little bit of a SSRIs debate and puberty blocker debate and also enabling delusion debate. But really what this is a person who was an outcast, who was always left out, constantly craving attention. And this was somebody that slipped through the cracks of society. Now, this person was propped up by their mother, was absolutely supported by their mother. Mother loved them, just as any mother loves their child, just about. But that wasn't enough. Sometimes people that feel estranged from the community and from society, they try to find groups that will make them feel welcome. And this is where I think the whole trans thing kind of gets hijacked, to be perfectly honest, because I do believe that people are born believing that they're in a different body. I totally get that. I get it. But there's a lot of acceptance in this community, and there's also a lot of copycats, just with anything. And when somebody can get accepted into a group of people, they'll do what they can or what they have to do to be accepted into that group. The perfect example is what I was just talking about. I just joined this heavy metal band because I could finally have that sense of community instead of, going and finding the group that actually fit my unique puzzle piece. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Telegram groups. I don't know how much people know about Telegram, but I can tell you some dark shit about Telegram. I'll give you an example of something that had happened. I want to say it was about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So I was in this Facebook group that was like a marijuana growing Facebook group, and they would talk about, growing mushrooms and marijuana and all sorts of different bullshit. And anyway, I had commented on a post one day. I think it had something to do with the electric forest. I was wanting to go to one. And I ended up getting this DM from somebody. And I can't remember the name of the person. I shouldn't even say the name if I did know it. But the person looked very odd. The picture did, at least. It was almost like their entire body was tattooed black. Very like the Machine Gun Kelly tattoo, black down to the arms, up to the shoulders kind of thing. Like when you see that, and I don't, whenever you see that many tattoos, it's a little intimidating. No offense to people that have tattoos. Actually, I don't give a fuck. That's offensive to people with tattoos. Tattoos offend me in some way. In some ways, not always, but sometimes they do. Anyway, not offend me, but intimidate me. So he asked me about, like, what do you do? I'm like, well, I like to do these drugs and this drug. I guess in a way I'm kind of a fucking garbage can. I'll do anything. Just dump it in me and I'll take it, right? Anyways, he invites me to this Telegram group. This Telegram group consists of pictures and videos of tons of different hard drugs. We're talking heroin, we're talking Molly, we're talking angel dust. And I'm talking mass quantities of shit, like commercial size quantities of stuff. And then he's giving out these prices to the Telegram group, and, you got to pay in Bitcoin, whatever, right? So there's different thresholds. And I'm like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this before. And then as we continue to progress further and further, then the Telegram group is now offering these ATM cards. What these ATM cards are is, this was for the Christmas season, the way they were advertising, you could buy the ATM card from this guy for $100. And if you put that ATM card into an ATM machine, you'd get $1,000 out of it. Too good to be true, right? Like, why wouldn't everybody do that? So he was trying to sell some to me privately. And I said, well, whose money are you taking? Because yes, I was a drug addict, but I was never a thief. I've never been a thief, and I'll never be a thief. I don't like stealing. I just don't. It's not my thing. And so whose money is that? Because it just doesn't pull out of thin air, right? Like how does that work? And maybe that's a stupid question to ask somebody, but I thought it was a valid question, because my initial thought was, well, that would be easy. Then I could buy more drugs with that money. And then my second thought was, well, then maybe I could buy my kids some extra special Christmas gifts. I'm thinking about all the ways I could spend that money, but in the end, I was like, this isn't right. So the point I'm getting at with these Telegram groups is, certain people, when they're on these 4chan forums and in the deeper parts of the internet, there are ops, whether that op is American intel or it's foreign intel, that hijack these transgender movements, that hijack these gay movements, that hijack any kind of movement that feels like inclusivity is like the main point of that group. They find these people and they're able to develop a cult in a Telegram. And it is now proven that, by the way, that the shooter was part of multiple Telegrams that promote sadism, Satanism, committing heinous act, killing children. This isn't a gun problem. This is a little bit of a mental health issue because somebody was an outcast and had to find community. This isn't a gun problem. These aren't problems that we had in the 60s, 70s, 80s. These are problems that we have now. So what's different now? Well, we could say SSRIs, antidepressants, anxiety medication, your Zolofts, or whatever the fuck it's called, Prozac, right? Lexapro, albuterol. No, albuterol is a breathing thing. Anyway, sertraline, right? All of them. That's different. Doesn't help, right? What else is different? Gun laws aren't different. They aren't too different. Let's see what else is different. Well, the internet's here. Social media is here. That's different. You know what else is different? The sense of community in religion no longer exists in society. And I'm not advocating, by the way, to become part of a Christian group or a Catholic group or a Muslim group or a Jewish group. That's not what I'm advocating for, because personally, here I am again, that unique puzzle piece. I don't fit in with religion either. I don't feel the need to have to go to church to prove that I'm worthy of heaven. I don't have to go to church to talk to God. I can talk to church in my bedroom. I can talk to God on my patio. So why would I go to church? Well, it's that sense of community. Maybe it is more about helping others for me, right? So those are the things that are different. Not gun laws. The right and the left still existed back then. The right and left, by the way, I don't even know what I am anymore. So we can combine two of the three things that are here now that are, I think, affecting today's society. I think you can bundle all three and into it, all of them together. So as modern day, we don't have the community that we once had. We have so many breakaway churches too, like that are like break away from the Christian faith and the Catholicism faith. Like there's so many different churches now. But when you are doing SSRIs, it's the same as me doing cocaine. You're numbing yourself from feeling that pain. You aren't able to talk to God when your soul is being intercepted by something that is affecting the chemical balance in your brain. Can we look at an anxiety or a depression as more of a nutrient deficiency instead of a medical issue? Can we find what that nutrient deficiency is? Or can we at least try to practice some different ways of finding what that deficiency is? Is it simply some type of vitamin, or is it more complicated than that? Is it maybe a blood type combined with that person's environment, combined with social media? This is the first generation of people that are having to endure, I would say, the wake of social media. How do we navigate where we could so easily be canceled because we're seen doing something on the street that is frowned upon in society. Justin Jefferson can't even go to the state fair anymore, or not anymore. Justin Jefferson can't even go to the state fair as a regular person and not sign autographs and not look like a bad person because there's social media. Oh, let's film this on TikTok and upload it to the rest of the state. And then half the state's criticizing for Justin Jefferson not signing autographs at the state fair. So we're numbing ourselves from facing our problems and solving our problems because as we take drugs, we run away from our problems. 100% we run away from our problems when we take drugs because it numbs that pain. And when we numb that pain, when we aren't talking to that inner voice, that's God that you're ignoring. And when God is leaving your body, when God is no longer in your body, there is space for a spirit to enter. And what that spirit was in this case was that shooter. This isn't a matter of guns. This has nothing to do with assault rifles. All this has to do with is the demon, the devil. And that's the way it should be looked at. The devil. Instead of our mayor and our governor trying to protect different communities and advocate for gun laws, let's advocate for the Lord. Let's advocate for life. Let's build that community with each other. Let's love each other and get to know our neighbors, because we don't know our neighbors anymore. We don't even want to see our neighbors. And by the way, I don't want to know my neighbors too well, because if I'm sitting on my deck, I don't want them to come over every fucking time I'm on my deck. Like, we can just wave and it'll be good, right? That's what I got today. I appreciate anybody that's listening to this. Like, subscribe. I'm going to have some interesting guests coming on pretty damn soon here. I really enjoyed this today, and I'll talk with you soon.